Hello, and welcome to the newest episode of the New Year 6 podcast. Today I'll be continuing my 2023 conference preview series. Last episode, we kicked off the group of five schools with the American Athletic Conference. Today I'll be moving over to Conference USA. So, looking forward to that. From a formatting perspective, same as the previous 6 videos. So, just going to walk through the conference bottom to top, and pick out a player on both offense and defense for every team that I think is due for a breakout season. Conference USA, much like the American, much like the Big 12, a lot of shakeup in terms of where these teams are coming from. They're down to only 9 teams right now, so everyone plays everyone. A couple of new additions from FCS, bringing in a couple of teams that were independent last year. A lot of these schools, a lot of CUSA schools ended up moving over to the American, so it'll be fun to see how this all fits together this year. But kicking us off, in CUSA this year, the team I have coming in last place, a team that last year I think defied some expectations and ended up looking, decent enough. Definitely competitive for a good chunk of the year, but I think they take a pretty sizable step back this year, and that's going to be UTEP. UTEP obviously not a historic powerhouse by any means in the conference. I think they end up back kind of in that usual playing spot of theirs, and just transparently speaking, I have these next. Probably these next 3 teams are all pretty interchangeable for me. Those are your clear bottom 3, but UTEP will be one of them. Just looking at the offense real quick, I do like their run game. I do like Deion Hankins at running back. 700-yard rusher. Someone who can find the end zone. Even though it is a spread offense, I do expect the running game to be featured predominantly. In this offense. I do think they have a good quarterback in Gavin Hardison, so I'm not really worried about either of those 2 positions. It's really looking at the receiver game, because while they do have Tyron Smith and in the receiver core, they aren't very deep in that room. The offense in general I think is going to be serviceable. Just compared to the rest of the conference, but outside of Tyron Smith, it's not a very deep room. So it's got to, the breakout player of the team is going to have to come out of that room. So with that in mind, I'm going to actually pick a tight end, so someone that has an opportunity to make an impact, and that would be Zach Fryer. So very limited playing time so far, and again, as I kind of work through these group of 5 conferences. Some of these schools, it's very hard to get information on the players on the roster, their depth charts, so on and so forth. Zach Fryer is a guy who has not played a lot so far. His only notable stat line is a 15-yard catch against Louisiana Tech. But outside of that, the kid is a senior. He hasn't really found the field yet. I expect a larger presence this year. I expect him to add to that passing game. He could be someone that surprises. He could be someone that adds fuel to the fire. I think it's an offense that can play around with it out there, and as a result of that, Fryer will be a viable option for Hardison to give the ball to. I'm sure he's going to be used in the run game as a blocker, but looking at the team as a whole, Fryer is the biggest opportunity to showcase something this year that really he hasn't so far. So I look to Fryer as that guy on offense, as somebody who can step up in a big way this year. The defense is actually pretty similar. I don't think on paper this team is that bad from a returning production point of view. I think the difference is it just comes down to skill set. It comes down to talent, where UTEP is still miles away from the rest of the top of the conference there. D-line looks all right. Looks like it's going to be right in the middle there. You do have Praise Amewule. You do have Keenan Stewart. So you got 2 guys on the D end, one on the end, one in the center, that can make those plays. It's a 4-2-5 defense. So that D line is important. Really like this linebacker room, really carried by Tyrese Knight. So definitely interested to see how he handles that role and handles that that role as a senior leader. He's done it in the past. I'm sure he can do it again this year. So not too worried about that front six, and I'm not even really that worried about the back five there. I think it's a very middle of the road secondary. So it's tough to determine what's weaker between the offense and defense. I think they're going to be both average enough, but from a returning production point of view, but the talent is still pretty pretty deep in comparison to to the rest of the conference. But looking at their DB room real quick, you do have Kobe Hilton back there. You do have AJ Odom, so you do have a strong safety and a cornerback that can make moves and make an impact for UTEP secondary. The player I'm going to pick as the breakout player is going to come from that secondary, and it'll end up being Jaleel Williams-Evans. So this is a JUCO transfer slated to start immediately, and he's only a sophomore as well. So got a little bit of eligibility remaining, which is huge for UTEP. If you watch my other videos, you know my rule. I don't watch JUCO football. You don't watch JUCO football. Nobody watches it, so we have no idea how good this guy is going to be. But the reality is that I don't think he would start on this team if he wasn't ready. I don't think he'd be. I don't think they'd pick him up if he wasn't ready to make that move. So I expect Williams-Evans to get involved in in this DB room. Right now it looks like they have him playing at safety, so I expect him to be in the mix of things. I expect him to step up in a big way, and from there just contribute to shutting down the opponent's passing game as much as you can. But only time will tell. So I'm looking at Williams-Evans on defense. I'm looking at Fryer on offense as breakout players on a UTEP team that I think they're going to struggle this year. I don't think they have it in them to evolve upon last year's 5-7 record. So moving on past UTEP, in an 8th place here is going to be a team that is one of our newcomers, and this is going to be a newcomer from FCS, so a team that makes their big jump in year one here. There's only 2 to pick from, so I'm going to stop spoiling anything for you, and that would be Jacksonville State. So Jacksonville State under head coach Rich Rodriguez in year 2 there. You may know him as pick a school there. West Virginia, Michigan. Finally ends up in the state of Alabama. Now that he's at Jacksonville State. I'm not going to get into the history of that one there, but I think that the leap from FCS to FBS is pretty large. I think Jacksonville State will do it over time. It's just going to take a little bit of time in year one. I think Rich Rod gets a mulligan this year. He gets some time to build because they looked good last year in FCS. They were a 9-2 team. They won the ASUN, but they weren't eligible for for postseason play because they're moving on up. But Jacksonville State could be a program down the line that evolves as a pretty solid Group of 5 team if given the chance. Looking at the offense, I'm not too worried about the jump up here. I think you got a talented receiver room, guys like Jamari Joyner, who else? PJ Wells. So, there's talent, there's depth. It's one of the better receiving rooms in the conference just immediately. I think their running back room is pretty similar. I think it's a little bit of a drop off compared to the receiver room, but not substantially, not a question mark or an issue. They have Malik Jackson back there, who's good for 500 in a season. So if you can do that again this year, the offense should be clicking, and that only leaves quarterback. So with that in mind, the breakout player in this conference for Jacksonville State on offense is going to be Zion Webb. So returning starter, which is huge. I think he's just going to break out because transparently, FCS to me, and this is not to the same degree as like JUCO, but I don't watch, I didn't watch any Jacksonville State games last year. I don't know how many of you watched, any FCS, unless you were, tuning in for Dion or if you were tuning in for College Game Day. But Jacksonville State was not on my watch radar last year, so I don't know a whole lot about Zion Webb. What I do know is what he's put up in the past against FCS opponents. That's all we can measure the guy off of. Good performance against Nichols. 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. Good running performance against Stephen F. Austin. 59 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that playmaker ability, that dual threat ability as a quarterback, we'll see how it translates to FBS. I think he could have a pretty big year, knowing that this is it for him as a senior. Really looking to make a splash in Jacksonville State's first year in FBS and leave them in a good spot for the future. I think he's the guy to do it for them. I think he's that leader on offense that can get the job done. So looking at Webb on offense as your breakout player, and then moving on to the defense, very, very, same kind of like UTEP, where on paper, a lot of returning production, but that skill gap is still pretty high between these bottom three schools and the rest of the conference. So looking at Jacksonville State, good front four presence. We like to see that. Like Jalen Swain on one end, and then they have Chris Hardy, who's kind of that edge rusher. It looks like it's a 4-2-5. It could be a 3-3-5, however they want to set it up. But not too worried about how they're going to run that defensive line. I think they have a good linebacker room. It's a duo there between Quay Drake and Laysha Hale. So a 1-2 punch at linebacker and a lot of experience back there. The DB room is a little bit of a drop off. I'd probably put it a lower middle in the conference. So you do have guys like Jeremiah Harris. You do have Colby Fuqua. So you do have that center. You that free safety. You do have that nickelback performance that you're kind of looking for back there. The corners, you can make an argument for Jamari Jemison. So, there's talent back there. It's just, again, not to the degree that we see in the rest of the conference. So with that in mind, the player I think is going to have a breakout year is one of their cornerbacks. If it's not Jemison, it's got to be Marco Baker. So Marco Baker's only real stat line as on defense is 2 passes defended, and just looking at the opponent there, it was Tulsa. So we can go look at Webb's performance. Those are all against FCS schools. Tulsa's FBS and in the American, so it's a Group of 5 school. He was batting down, passes against the type of opponents that Jacksonville State will see over the course of their full 12-game season. That's a big move against a team that's a pretty strong upgrade from what they were usually seeing. So the way I see it, if he can do it against them, he can do it against everyone on their schedule. They play everyone in the conference. They got a 4-game out of conference slate, which I don't have in front of me, but I imagine it's going to be a couple of Power 5 schools on there, so on and so forth. But Baker's going to have those opportunities this year. He is a junior, and it's a defense with a lot of seniors on it as well. So he'll have that opportunity to come back next year. Be one of those vocal guys. This defense, next year should be even better if you really break it down and kind of see, that mix there. It's about 50-50 junior senior. So interesting to see what next year will look like. But the DB room this year, probably middle of the pack, and I think Baker makes the most of year one in FBS level. Year one potentially as a starter in this DB room, and builds this group up alongside him. So I'm looking at Baker on defense, and I'm looking at Webb on offense for a Jacksonville State team that is making their way into CUSA and trying to make a splash early on. All right, so 9th was UTEP. Jacksonville State was 8th. Moving on to 7th, this is a returning team. This is a team that it's one of your historical struggling teams in CUSA, so that that narrows it down to probably 1 or 2 at this point. Looking at who's left, they actually, at least in my eyes, probably outperformed expectations last year compared to this. Last year compared to what we usually see from them. Year 2 head coach looking to make an improvement upon last year. I don't think it happens this year. I think they're kind of stuck in that that little bubble right now, and this would be FIU. So FIU, obviously, one of the ones that's kind of struggled the most in CUSA, had a couple of up years here and there, but never consistently at the top of the conference. You would think as a South Florida school, in a conference that doesn't have a lot of competition in the state. Especially now that FAU is gone, they are the only team in the state of Florida in this conference. They should be able to be picking up higher quality talent than quite a few of these other schools. So FAU may be a program on the rise. It's just going to take a little bit of time for them to get there, and it's not going to be this year either. The offense is where I have the most questions, kind of all over the field here. Whether it's running back, Shamari Lawrence, whether it's Grayson James at quarterback. I almost picked him as my breakout player, but I'm going to lean on the receiver room just because it's not particularly top-heavy and or deep. I think the only one you can really look at is Chris Mitchell as a go-to guy. Everyone else there's questions about. Whether it's consistency, whether it's being out there, whether it's making those big plays. We just don't really see it with this FIU receiver room. So with that, I'll take Dean Patterson, the youngest kid out there, as my breakout player on offense. Really, the two stat line items that stick out to me were a 5 catches against Middle Tennessee and a 46-yard catch against UConn. 5 catches is a big game, and Middle Tennessee is in their conference, so it's not FCS. It's the type of opponent you will see, every single year. You're going to play MTSU again this year, so if you got 5 last year, I'm sure he wants 7 this year. And a 46-yard catch, and against UConn, who was up last year. UConn had a good year last year, compared to what they usually had, and a 46-yard catch is a big play. So I think for what Patterson can offer, it looks like it's going to be, that big boom play, those 46-yard plays, but getting open and taking it down the field, the yards after catch and the yards after contact. But then if he needs to play in more of that, that chip game, 5 catches against Middle Tennessee, whether it's I don't have how much yardage it was, but if it's 5 8-yard catches, that moves the ball and it keeps it in your hands, and that's all you got to do sometimes. So I look at Patterson to be used more frequently. I see him kind of being moved around the field more, and it'll be interesting to see how he fits in into this spread offense in year 2. So looking at the defense real quick, I do think this is where FIU is going to win their games. They have the best D-line in Conference USA right now. So, and it's really, on the backs of, guys like Jeremy Passmore and Jordan Garrard. So they're running a 3-3, not a 3-3-5, this is a 3-4. So 3-4 defense, so those DNs are important. And fortunately, you have playmakers on both sides. The DB room is nice, definitely some playmakers back there. JoJo Evans is a great safety that they can lean on. Jamal Potts in that nickelback spot is going to be big, and it's generally a pretty young defense too, so it might be tough in this year for this defense, but it's something to build upon, because I'm just eyeballing this depth chart right here, and I'm seeing 5 seniors. So compared to some of these other programs that are starting 8 or 9 back there, that's an advantage for the future. You get a lot of experience out of these guys this year. The linebacker room is where I have some questions. I think there's a little bit of a drop-off compared to the rest of the conference. You do have Donovan Manuel back there as your right inside linebacker. That's your leader back there. That's your go-to guy, whether it's backing coverage, whether it's up on the D-line, wherever they want to use him. He's all over the field. He's your field general back there. But if I am going to take a breakout player on FIU, it is going to come from that linebacker room. And it's going to be a transfer. So someone who transferred from a school 9 miles away, and that would be Avery Huff. So comes in from the University of Miami, couldn't crack the starting lineup there, couldn't get that playing time that he was looking for. 4-star recruit in the class of 2019, looking to make a name for himself at FIU. This is the good thing about the transfer portal. It's a guy who didn't crack the lineup, didn't get what he was looking for out in Miami, gets a fresh start, stays close to home, stays close to, maybe his friends and family that he already has down there, and, he can still, play at the level that he expects to. He can live up to that 4-star talent, because between you and me, FIU is not consistently getting 4-star recruits out of high school. I can't tell you the last time they got one. So if they can get him through the portal and it's a guy looking to revitalize his career, this may be the place to do it. So I'm looking for Huff to live up to that hype, to be a consistent starter for FIU on defense this year, take that linebacker room to the next level, and ultimately coach up the guys that are younger on this team. I expect him to be kind of that older leader on this team, and someone who's seen competition at a pretty high level and knows what to expect when when everything's in front of him. So I'm looking at Huff on defense. I'm looking at Patterson on offense as the breakout players for FIU this year, as they try to build upon last year. I don't think it happens this year, but keep an eye on them for the future. All right, so just recapping: UTEP in 9th, Jacksonville State in 8th, FIU in 7th. We're now in 6th place here. This is a team that is also new to the conference this year, so narrows it down to a couple. But just to end the suspense, it's our a team that's joining us from FCS and making that transition. That would of course be Sam Houston. So Sam Houston, as we're what am I trying to say here? Sam Houston comes up from FCS, makes it up to FBS this year, and the reality is they're in a place to make that jump and make that bump this year. Really interested to see how they develop a program. Now that they're in FBS. I'm of the belief that if you are in a football-rich state, and I think I said this in my last video, that if you're in a football-rich state, doesn't matter what conference you're in, you have the ability to be the top dog in your conference just by the virtue of how much talent there is around you. You can get those 3 stars. They don't get Power 5 offers, and you can have the best 3-star loaded roster in the country. That's the way I look at it. And Sam Houston could be that team if given time. Looking at their offense real quick, I do think that they automatically have the best receiver room in the conference, and it's really led by Ife Adai. And that's your one your number one guy. He's a 10 touchdown receiver, and it's big to have a phenomenal wideout like that. For this team, I think Keegan Shoemaker is a solid quarterback that keeps the ball in his hands and moving along. It's going to be a good year for him with that receiver core. The running back room is the one I know the least about, just by virtue of, again, coming from FCS to FBS. And with that in mind, I think the breakout player is going to come from that room, and it'll be Zach Arbacek. That's my guess on how to pronounce it. So comes up from FCS, Sam Houston, stays with the team. Only notable stat line I saw last year was against Tarleton State, which was 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. And yes, it's an FCS opponent, but they were an FCS team, so got to take that into consideration. 202-2 is 202-2, and honestly, looks like it was where the majority of his stat line came from. So I want to see that performance against every team in your conference this year. That's how Sam Houston is going to have that balanced offense. I do think they're going to be a little bit more pass heavy this year, just due to the talent on this team. But really interesting to see how Arbacek is going to do in this role, and how he's going to handle the transition from FCS to FBS. I'm really looking forward to it. The defense is where I got some questions, because really outside the linebacker room, this team has some holes to fill. So linebacker room is, I'll say it, it's the best in the conference as well. So, and it's Kavian Gaither, and then Jalen Phillips, that nice 1-2 punch. It's a 4-2-5, so got to have those linebackers ready to go, and they definitely do at Sam Houston. The DB room is a little questionable, because outside of Jabari Johnson at free safety, I don't know who your next guy up is. I don't really know who your first guy up is on that D-line. The D-line is probably the least experienced on this team, and the curious part to that is that there's everyone here is a senior or a grad student. So it's interesting that those numbers haven't translated yet. They have to translate this year, and the player I think is going to step up and do that is Markel Perry. So very limited playing time. Now he's a grad student, very little exposure and experience. Did show up against Texas A&M last year. Had a four tackle performance against Texas A&M, and I know Texas A&M offense was not that great last year, but it's still an FCS school versus an SEC school. So he was making plays, for Sam Houston last year, and that's going to be big this year. I need 4 tackles for him in every single game if Sam Houston's going to make a difference up front. So if he's starts churning them out and he has a 40-50 tackle season, they're going to be in a good place. So I want to see that 4 tackle performance. I want to see him shedding blocks, hitting the quarterback, hitting the running back, doing whatever he needs to do, filling holes out there. Just being that role player and being that guy that steps up for his team. So that's what I want to see from Perry this year, and then Arbacek on offense for a Sam Houston team that, again, could be a work in progress. One of those teams that's on the verge of it. Kind of same with this next team as well. I think they're interchangeable on where they all end up. So this next team is it's a newcomer to the conference. So how many does that leave? I think that there's only 2 left, and they're both coming from independent. And with that in mind, it's a team that broke out of their shell last year and really rose to the occasion. And second year of a good head coach. Really interested to see how it works out for him. But this would be New Mexico State. So Jerry Kill came down to New Mexico State, a program that honestly averages between, at least in my lifetime, probably 1 to 3 wins. So, having him come down and win 7 games in his first year is huge for this program. Jerry Kill is an amazing head coach, very underrated, and looking forward to seeing what he can do in year 2. The offense is probably a step up from the defense, at least on paper, but there's definitely some questions to be had. It's pretty pedestrian across the board. Star Thomas is a solid running back. Not a whole lot above that though. Same with Diego Pavia. Just a solid by the numbers dude at quarterback. Which if you're New Mexico State, that's probably what you need. You need someone who's not going to lose you games. You need someone who's going to be good enough to get down the field, and I believe that's what Pavia can do for them. The receiver room is where I think there's a little bit of a drop-off. It's probably lower middle in terms of value in the conference. You do have Cordell David, who I think can be that number 1 guy for you, but outside of that, there's kind of that lack of depth. And I think the breakout player comes from that room, and it comes in the form of Reggie Ackles. Or Ackles. JUCO transfer. Said it earlier. I'm going to keep repeating it for the rest of these series. I don't watch JUCO. You don't watch JUCO. Only these coaches do. So I'm sure Jerry Kill has an eye for talent and identified him, brought him in with the intention of him being a playmaker for this offense. No different than what he did up in Minnesota. I think he's taking that same philosophy down here in New Mexico State. Don't know a whole lot about the kid, but I know he's likely going to start. And with that in mind, I think he is just an additional option for this team to utilize. So I don't think he would start if the coach didn't think he was ready. I don't think he'd be out there if the coach didn't think he could make an impact. So I'm picking Ackles on offense to be that breakout player for New Mexico State. On defense here, this is where you have a little bit of a drop off. I think every position group in this team is probably bottom third of the conference in terms of returning production. The DB room, you got a couple of players back there. You got Andre Selden in that nickel back role, Dylan Early in the safety spot. Who else? Torrin Union at corner. So you have pieces here and there, and I think it's a little bit of an upgrade compared to these other position groups. The D line is a little rough in its own right. We'll pick Dion Wilson as your guy back there or up front. But really, outside of that, I don't know who your number 2 is. It's a very young defense, so kind of same deal with some of these other teams where it might be rough this year, but in the future it will be pretty big. Same with the linebacker room. I don't know who your number one or your number two is in terms of, being that guy out there. So my breakout player will come in the form of Javion Gibson. So very limited playing time. He is a sophomore, so he's got plenty of time. 3-star recruit in the class of 2021, so just looking to make sure that he lives up to that expectation this year and beyond. Had a 2-tackle performance against New Mexico, and then a 2-tackle performance against Valparaiso. Valparaiso is FCS, so no harm, no foul. New Mexico is, Mountain West, obviously, not particularly close to the top of it historically, but again, it's an in-state rival. It's a big game, so the spotlight isn't too bright as we've seen. So interesting to see what Gibson will do as a full-time starter, as someone who's going to be out there, more consistently, taking more snaps over the course of the season. The linebacker room is a young one. It's 2 sophomores back there in a 4-2-5. So the pressure's on for him. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts to a full conference schedule. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts to consistent starting time. But I really do believe that Gibson and all these younger starters will rise to the occasion eventually. I think Gibson will be the first to do it by kind of a trial by fire mentality. So I look at Gibson on defense, Ackles on offense as your breakout players for a New Mexico State team that is looking to get back to above 500. It's TBD on my end, but I think it'll be in the discussion. It very well could happen. I'm not banking on it, but it's gonna be close. So, all right. So just to recap, UTEP in 9th, Jacksonville State at 8th, FIU in 7th, Sam Houston 6th, and New Mexico State in 5th. Did I get that right? 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So we are down to our top 4. I think it's really these next 2 teams are in the same tier, and then your conference championship matchup is in its own tier. So just taking it down the rest of the conference here real quick. This next team is a team that struggled last year with a first-year head coach. I think he makes a pretty sizable jump this year. I think he puts it all together, and as a result of that, in a pretty high-powered offense from what I see, has a very successful year compared to what last year looked like, and that would be Louisiana Tech. So Sonny Cumbie came in last year, 3-9 year, real tough, but he has some dudes this year, and I think he puts it together. So just looking at the offense real quick, probably one of the better offenses in the conference if you really put it all together. I think you got the best running back in Marquise Crosby. You got Hank Bachmeier coming down from Boise State, a guy who lost that starting job last year, I believe. Looking for redemption. I believe that's a Hank Bachmeier that beat Florida State. So a quarterback I'm a fan of just for that one game. But outside of that, you do it for the receiver room, which I think is good enough to to play with Bachmeier. It's one of the it's in the upper third of the conference for sure. So top 3, at least in my eyes. You do have Smoke Harris. You got Cyrus Allen. So you have your one guy, you have your 2 guy. I'm not worried about really depth pieces or top line pieces for this receiver room. I am going to take a breakout player from that room, though. It's just going to be one of the younger guys, and that's going to be their tight end, and that would be Nate Jones. So someone who's shown a little bit of potential last year, touchdown against Rice, a 31-yard catch against FIU. So, Rice was a conference opponent last year, so 2 conference opponents that he's either scored or had big plays against. Interesting to see how he's going to put it together this year. I think Hank Bachmeier is a big step up for them at quarterback, and it'll be interesting to see what Bachmeier can do in his new environment and how Jones gets utilized, as a weapon on this offense. So I think he's going to be looked at as option probably 3, 4, or 5, and defenses might sleep on him a little bit as a result of that, knowing that they have to go after Crosby. They might have to put 2 on him or 2 on Smoke Harris. Well, there's only so many guys you can double team out there before you leave one guy open. Nate Jones might be that guy. So interesting to see how he's going to develop as a pass catcher, as a blocker this year, how he's going to be utilized in this offense this year. It is an air raid, so I'm sure those receivers are licking their chops, ready to go. And interesting to see how this is all gonna work out for a for this offense, and how Nate Jones plays a part of it. Looking on the defense, again, this is a little bit of a step back compared to the offense, but I think this offense is going to be dynamic. The defense on this case is going to be, basically good enough. I think they got a few position groups that are top 3 in the conference here. That would be the DBs and the linebackers. So just starting with the DBs, Miles Hurd is a very good safety. This is a very seasoned and senior linebacker and DB room. I think every single one of them starting is a senior. So it's going to come into fruition for Louisiana Tech this year, just due to how this all works out for them. So looking at who they got, it's Miles Hurd, Cecil or Cecil Singleton. You can throw Keyshawn Paul into the mix, so you got a dual safety combo. You got that cornerback there. So not worried about how they're going to perform back there. Not worried about the linebacker group when you got Hugh Davis as your leader back there, guy who can play back in coverage, who can get those sacks. So not worried about those two position groups in particular. The D line, I think, is going to be average. So definitely not going to lose games because of them, but not going to, if you need a big sack when it comes down to it, I don't know if I would expect that. It's going to be good enough to keep everyone in check. And it's really on the backs of your DNs there, Deshaun Hall and Michael Clark. So, you have two players that will bring it together and, have those opportunities. And have showed that they're capable of doing it. The player I'm going to take as my breakout player on defense is going to come in that nose tackle spot, and that's going to be Omar Pugh. JUCO transfer. I'm really going to be saying it in these Group of 5 conference videos. I don't watch JUCO. You don't watch JUCO football, so you got to trust Sonny on this one. I don't think he'd be starting if the coach didn't believe he could do it. I don't think he'd be picked up if the coach didn't believe he could fit in with the culture and with the campus and with the team. So, I really think that he's going to step up in a big way this year. I think defenses are going to try to run, or offenses are going to try to run on this defense just due to what they know is in the linebacker and DB room. So, Pugh's going to have his options. And he is a junior, too, so he's going to build upon what he could be, right? He's going to he knows he's got a season left after this. He knows that, this is the building block, and then the finale comes in 24. So I think, he lives up to some potential this year and then generates even more of that in 2024. So I look at Pugh on defense. I look at Jones on offense as your breakout players for a Louisiana Tech team that makes a pretty big splash in 2023. So that brings us to our final 3. So let me just get through these first few real quick. So UTEP in 9th, Jacksonville State at 8th, FIU in 7th, Sam Houston at 6th, New Mexico State in 5th, and Louisiana Tech in 4th. So that brings us to our final 3. So it brings us to our newcomer in Liberty, and it brings us to two of our returning teams there in the form of Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. So 2 of them will make it on to their conference championship game. One of them is going to be on the outside looking in. So without further ado, the team I have in 3rd place is going to be Middle Tennessee. So that means we have a conference championship game of Liberty versus Western Kentucky. I'll talk about Middle Tennessee first. Good year last year, 8-win season. I expect more of it again this year. You do have some turnover, you do have some question marks. I think that's what keeps them out of that conference championship game this year. So, just looking at the team on offense, that's where you have the most amount of question marks, at least that I'm seeing so far. You do have Frank Peasant at running back, so I am not worried about establishing a run game. But with Rick Stockstill's air raid offense, you do expect high play from your quarterback and from your receivers. The receiver room is a little empty at this point. It's just younger in general. I think your only real playmaker coming back is DJ England Chisholm. So outside of him, I'm trying to find who that next guy up is. Same with quarterback. It's someone that didn't prove themselves a lot last year, but is ready to make a big name for themselves this year, and that's going to be Nicholas Vati. Let me get this name right. Vatiato. I'm going to go with Vatiato. So 203 yards against Charlotte, and really his only main performance last year of note. 3-star recruit in the class of 2020, so still plenty of time to prove himself. Still plenty of time to live up to that rating. An air raid offense is going to be everything that a quarterback dreams of. He's going to be throwing it 40 times a game, probably minimum. And as a result, he'll be coming back with 2 years of eligibility left, and with a giant chip on his shoulder to take home the crown. I don't think they do it this year, but Vatiato, as your quarterback for the future, makes a name for himself this year as as the guy that Middle Tennessee can lean on heading into the future. I think he evolves into one of the better quarterbacks in the conference, and prove himself this year. The defense, I actually think, is going to be pretty good across the board. You have the best DB room in the conference, and it's really on the backs of guys like Fluellen. Who else we got back there? Teldrick Ross at the corner. So I'm not worried about offenses trying to score on them through the air. A team like Western Kentucky, for example, that is air raid offense, is going to have a hard time against Middle Tennessee when you have those playmakers back there. The D-line, I think, is solid, and someone that I think it's top 3 in the conference, and it's one that can apply pressure. You have playmakers on the ends with Zaylen Wood and Richard Kinley. It's a 4-3 offense, so you have your guys up front, and they've been making plays so far. The linebacker room is the one I have the most questions about, just because on paper it's the youngest. You do have Devin Curtis back there as a leader. You have Drew Francis back there, who I'm not worried about as well. And I think in general, it's a good defense. I think Middle Tennessee is going to put some people away just by virtue of how good this defense is. And the player I think is going to break out this year at the conference level is going to be Parker Hughes. So 4-tackle performance against Western Kentucky, and that's in this conference, Western Kentucky is one of the better teams historically. So 4-tackle performance is definitely what you want to see from your linebacker there. Picked up a sack against UTEP. So it was a UTEP team last year that was definitely above their average. So I want to see that consistency. I want to see it in he's a redshirt sophomore, so year 3. I want to see him evolve upon that. I want to see him consistently playing all over the field, whether it's in the backfield and hitting quarterbacks and getting pressure, whether it's guarding slot receivers and getting back in coverage, whatever they want to use him at. This is his year. In that weak side linebacker role, it's going to take that time to develop. I think it's time for Hughes to make that step. It's a younger linebacker room compared to everything else on this team. And, again, if you're looking at the future of Middle Tennessee, this guy's going to be a crucial part of it, and this is the year he shows us why. So I look at Hughes on defense, Vatiato on offense as your defensive and offensive breakout players for Middle Tennessee, a team that's going to be on the outside looking into the conference championship, but a team that is a good year nonetheless. And that brings us to our final 2 teams. So we have a conference championship of Liberty versus Western Kentucky, a newbie versus an old team. I'll start with Liberty. They're the new kids on the block, so I'll bring them in. Year 1 with Coach Jamie Chadwell, new conference. Interesting to see how this is all going to fit together. Doesn't come without some question marks, so I'm not going to pretend like this is an immaculate team on paper. Just a matter of how does it translate to their new home. Good, decent receiver room, really led by C.J. Daniels, but outside of that, it's not a very deep one, but you do have your number 1 guy there, and that goes a long way. I'm interested to see how Jonathan Bennett does at quarterback. I'm looking to see him develop. I think Chadwell has done some work with these QBs in the past and made them into some pretty impressive players. So I'm looking to see if Bennett can be his next project and maybe get to the top of the conference when it's all said and done. But the running back room is going to be led by a true freshman, which to me is really interesting because there's only a few teams I've talked about so far across all my videos that have a true freshman running back. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. And for me, that breakout player will be that true freshman. It's going to be Vaughn Blue. So 2023 commit. I believe he was unranked. I don't think he was a 3-star. So interesting to see how this is all going to come together for him. Interesting to see how Liberty adapts to their new conference. And again, up-tempo spread is at least in my eyes, it could be great for a running back, especially if you have that speed, if you got that stamina to keep things moving. Blue could have a field day in this offense. So that's my mentality. Again, I don't know a whole lot about the high school kids. We only know like what we see on film, and again, you playing against 11 kids and none of them went D1, D2, or D3 doesn't raise a whole lot of hope in me. It doesn't show me that you're that guy yet, but I believe Chadwell when he puts a true freshman out there as your starter. So I look to Blue to set the bar quick as a freshman and only grow from there. So I'm going to take Blue on offense as your breakout player for Liberty. On defense, this is where I think you got a little bit more questions than on offense. The D-line is I think lower middle here, and it's really just based off the back of Kendi Charles. That one guy up front that can make plays. The linebacker room, I think you got some questions. It's a 4-2-5 defense, so kind of what everyone's playing right now. Tyron Dupree is your leader back there, but outside of him, I don't know who your number 2 guy is and beyond. The DB room, I think, is one of the weakest ones in the conference when it comes to returning production, because outside of Brandon Bishop and that nickel back, I'm having a hard time seeing who that next guy is, who the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 are. And with that, I'm going to take someone from that DB room as your breakout player, and that's going to be Jalen Jimerson. So picked up played a game last year, hasn't seen the field a whole lot for Liberty yet, but is going to be thrown into a starting role at free safety. It'll be interesting to see how this all comes together. I think it's a defense that has nowhere to go but up. Generally, a lot of youth on both sides of the ball, which is pretty interesting. I could be taking a risk putting Liberty at number 2, but if they recruited well and they got all these kids bought and sold and ready to locked in for this season, then guys like Jimerson and guys like Blue are going to have big years for Liberty. No, not just this year, but beyond. So look out for Jimerson on defense. Look out for Blue on offense as a breakout player for a Liberty team that at least in my eyes is probably going to make the conference championship in year 1. So now let me go to Western Kentucky real quick. Obviously, that offense just churning out talent. Easily the best quarterback in the conference in Austin Reed, 40 touchdown guy. You just expect more year after year. So if he got 40 last year, 45 this year is not off the table. 5,000 yards is not off the table. I'm seeing it right now. Future 7th round pick to the, let's say, Pittsburgh Steelers. And then figure it out from there. Just kind of the path of a Western Kentucky quarterback. Receiver room, I think is the best in your conference. It's really based upon Malachi Corley. Having Michael Matheson out there as well is big. But best quarterback, best receiver room. Western Kentucky, I believe, was a top 5 scoring offense in all of college football last year. I expect similar results this year. The running back room is, the most questionable by virtue of the other 2 are so good. So just put 2 and 2 together, and I'll pick them as my breakout player. This would be Davian Irvin Poindexter. So, and ultimately, I think this is a guy that's probably lower middle in the conference as is. So not some scrub that we don't know about, not some guy that's never proven himself. Someone that has rushed for over 500 yards before. Had a 2-touchdown performance against FIU last year, 34-yard catch against South Alabama. So, FIU conference foe. South Alabama, let's put it in perspective here. A good South Alabama team last year. That may have been a bowl game. Don't quote me on it. It could be. So, again, showed himself as a pass threat, which I'm sure is huge for this Western Kentucky team. If they can throw a check down to the running back and have him go for 20, they're going to do that as much as they can. Shows he can hit the end zone as a running back. So interesting to see how this is all going to come together. But I expect a good year out of Irvin Poindexter, as a supplementary piece to an offense that is pass heavy. On the defensive side of the ball, this is where I think you get a little bit more questionable. Just starting at the DB unit and moving forward. DB room is average. It's they aren't going to lose games because of it. You got Upton Stout at corner. Talik Allen at safety. It's a little bit more loaded back there. Rome Weber, Kendrick Simpkins. So I'm not worried about the DB room quite as much. It's above average. So I think they're going to do their job. I think this defense is going to rely on the fact that their offense can go out there and score on will. And I think that's going to be an advantage where the pressure is a little lighter, where even if they make a mistake, they know their offense can go out there and correct it. The linebacker room is middle of the pack, and it's really led by Jaquez Evans. So not really worried back there as well. It's a serviceable group at the linebackers. It's a serviceable group at the DBs. The D-line is the only one I've got a little bit more questions about, and I believe this is a 3-3-5 defense. So, looking at what they're running out there real quick. Outside of Jaden Loving, I don't know who your guy is, because it's a very young defense in general. I'm seeing a lot of sophomores, juniors. I'm trying to look for seniors. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3. So if Western Kentucky's in the conference championship game with 3 seniors on defense, they're going to build something special long term. But on defense, the player I'm going to pick as a breakout player will be on that D-line, and it's going to be the youngest guy on this team, and that'll be Deontay McCray. So redshirted last year. Again, not a whole lot of info on some of these guys. This is one that I couldn't find a whole lot on. But redshirted last year, expected to start or at least be in the rotation this year. The D-line is, at least in my eyes, it's bottom middle of the conference, might be bottom third of the conference. So, we're going to see how that takes place or how it takes shape over the course of this year. I think McCray's presence is going to play a big role in that. Just looking at who O-linemen are going to be focused on a little bit more. It's probably not him. It's probably the guys around him, which will create opportunities for McCray. So I'm looking for him to live up to that hype. I'm looking for him to promote this Western Kentucky defense in a way that takes them into this championship game. So his performance, along with the performance of the rest of these guys, is going to help this team end up well-rounded and in a position to potentially take the crown this year. So I look at McCray on defense. I look at Irvin Poindexter on offense as your defensive and offensive breakout players on a Western Kentucky team that is heading to the conference championship. So, all right, with that in mind, now I got to pick a winner. Did everything else. Time to narrow it down to one. So, am I going to take the newcomer? The team that comes in without a conference and thinks they can just waltz their way into year one, or am I taking the guys that have been on the doorstep for years and are finally getting a chance and finally getting an opportunity to take it home to where are they at? I think they're in Bowling Green. So who are we going to pick? Are we doing Liberty or are we going Western Kentucky? I think your Conference USA 2023 football champions will be Western Kentucky. I think that firepower is just something else. This is an amazing looking offense. Tyson Helton has done a great job out there, and I'm really interested to see what they can do this year, especially with a lot of that top level talent is now gone. Or that top level competition is gone. UTSA is gone. UAB is gone. I'm trying to think who was. Yeah, I mean they lost Rice and FAU, but they weren't competing with them anyway. So I think the path is clear for Western Kentucky to take it this year, and I think they could be the standard of the conference for the future if no one else catches up to them. So that's my thoughts on Conference USA. Thanks for tuning in today. Next video, we'll be heading over to the MAC. We've got MAC, Mountain West, Sun Belt, and the Independents. So we are almost at the start of college football. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching today. And looking forward to making more of these heading up to the start of the season.